Good evening. Welcome back to Front Page Close-Up for our third and final chapter of our interview with courageous leading Muslim reformer Raheel Raza. Raheel, welcome back to our final part.
Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about Barack Obama and the international scene. But first, Raheel, you are from Pakistan. I think something very sad has been happening there, but is happening there recently. We saw the assassination of the governor there, I think in Punjab province, who was trying to stop these blasphemy laws, and he got killed.
Yes. But
there seems that, am I correct, that there was actually more support for the killer than for the governor?
Yes, that is the sad part.
What's going on
Jamie, it absolutely breaks my heart to see the radicalization of normal, educated, visionary people in Pakistan. I think Pakistan has started to lose its moral and ethical compass, and it's frightening to see how the spread of radical Islam has engulfed people's reasoning. I saw the celebration of, the assassin who killed Salman Taseer, who was a progressive, liberal, Western-educated man who was trying to bring about change. And I am as vehemently against this blasphemy law as he was, because due to this blasphemy law, minorities have been oppressed, Christians have been killed. In fact, there is a very small percentage of minorities even left in Pakistan.
What exactly is the blasphemy law?
The blasphemy law is complicated. Essentially, it's used as a tool if they want to arrest somebody. It says that according to this blasphemy law, nobody can say anything negative about the faith.
Yeah.
Right?
I saw something crazy the other day, that a guy had a business card in the Muslim world,
and the other Muhammad.
And the guy, somebody threw it away, and he got charged for blasphemy.
So this is how trivial it is.
Yeah.
And anyone can get up and say, I mean, if I went to the court and said that you said something negative about Prophet Muhammad, that's it, you're finished. I know, but it doesn't matter if you didn't. But that's how it works.
No,
so people use it all the time. They use it to stop opposition. They use it for power politics.
Is this Islamic?
No.
Okay, if it's not Islamic, why are you where is the opposition to?
Okay, let me rephrase that. Sorry to go back.
It's rooted in Islam.
It's not in the Quran, and this is where we have to keep on separating these things.
It's in the Hadiths.
Yes, it's part of the in some of the schools of Islamic law, it's and jurisprudence, it exists, but not in all the schools.
Okay.
There are now scholars who have given fatwas saying that it is wrong, but the Pakistani government doesn't seem to be willing to let it go.
Are you pessimistic about your homeland?
I'm very pessimistic about my homeland.
Is it dangerous for you to go back and visit?
I don't want to think about that, but I guess it might be. But when I'm there, I stay very much under the radar.
I want to, try to touch on a few things before we have to go. So let's try to keep it brief. But I really want to know, Raheel, how did you come to be who you are? In the sense that, you grew up in Pakistan.
Yes.
What kind of Islam was taught to you that you, let's say, didn't become somebody that hates Jews and hates Israel and wants to see the U.S. collapse? What was your intellectual, spiritual journey that made you different from the Muslims, let's see, we see on TV?
Oh, I know, Jamie. It's a very frightening thing to see how this radicalization has engulfed so many people. My upbringing was like thousands and millions of other Muslims, which was just a spiritual message of the faith. But what I did is I read and understood it, because nowhere in the Quran does it say that we have to hate the Jews and the Christians. In fact, it says we must be compassionate and merciful towards the Jews and Christians. They are people of the book. They are, Islam doesn't stand alone. It is a continuation of the other faith.
You as a Muslim, you like the Jews?
Of course.
Do you support Israel?
Yes.
This is very rare to find in the Islamic community, am I correct?
Yes, I know, but that is because people are not thinking.
Why don't you start an organization, Muslims for Israel?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, but in other words, also you would argue that it's not Islamic to be anti-Israel.
Absolutely not.
But doesn't Muhammad curse the Jews in the Quran, saying they're apes and monkeys?
No, he doesn't. This
Or
is
he-
all
But
misinformation.
it
No,
says
this,
that they're descended from apes.
no,
and
it
monkeys.
doesn't. No,
Well, where
this is
does
such a
Hamas-
bunch of garbage.
Okay, but why are they therefore called apes and monkeys by Hamas? And it's in the
Because
Quran.
people misuse and
But it's in the
misinterpret.
Quran.
No, it isn't that they're apes and monkeys.
But he turned
There
them
is,
into-
no. It is not about the Jews and Christians. That sentence about apes and monkeys is about, I mean, some community that may have existed. There is absolutely no reason based theologically in the religion of Islam for Muslims to hate Jews. There is a new book out called "The Jew Is Not My Enemy." You should read it, and it actually explains the
Okay.
historical, political context.
But there
It's
are,
a
wait a minute,
political
there are
movement.
some verses in the Quran that
Yes.
refer to some Jews.
To say that do not take them for friends or kill them where
No,
you
about
find
the
them.
apes and monkeys.
No, not Jews being apes and monkeys.
Who was apes and
No,
monkeys
this
then?
is referred to some tribe that existed at that time, but not the
Okay,
Jews.
okay.
Very clearly, not the Jews or the Christians.
And the Muslims that do argue that are incorrect.
Well, of
in
course,
that.
they're
Yeah.
basically ignorant. Half the Muslims that argue the stuff that they're talking about haven't read the meaning of the Quran. They don't understand what it means to be a Muslim. They don't understand that we have to respect people of the book.
Okay.
They don't read it with that understanding. You know, Jamie, if you take a line out of context of any scripture and just throw it at somebody, one line out of context, whether it is the Torah, whether it's the Bible or the Quran, it can mean something entirely different. So your intention
Okay.
is very important.
Right.
see?
Now, but the Jews have suffered very much at the hands of radical Islam. The Christians are now suffering
Yes.
as well. I mean, they always have, but I'm saying, what do you think about what's happening in Egypt? It seems,
It's a terrible
it seems
thing
that
that's
there's
happening.
a plan of genocide being planned against Christians in Egypt by the Muslims there.
Yes, there is a huge oppression of Christians, and it seems to be growing because not enough people are speaking out. However, having said this, there have been some great fatwas that have come out in the past week or two by Islamic scholars saying that this is absolutely un-Islamic, it is absolutely wrong. It is very, very depressing. It is very sad to see what is happening in Muslim lands against minorities, not only Christians, but there is genocide against fellow Muslims as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
You know, they have persecuted the Sufis, the Shias,
Yeah.
the Ahmadiyas, the Ismailis. So it's not something that is happening only to non-Muslims.
Okay, Raheel, is President Obama helping the situation by traveling around the world, bowing to our enemies, bowing to the Saudi king? What do you think about his bowing? And
I have a lot of difficulty with his bowing, by the way.
but he
I mean,
yes. Bowing to the Saudi
But
king.
bowing to
What do you
bowing,
think of that?
I think that,
I mean,
you know,
that's a
he's
country
showing
that-
weakness. I think that he's basically a very good person, but he is not strong on this issue in the sense that, you know, bowing to the Saudi king shows subservience. Also, he hasn't surrounded himself with the right kind of Muslim advisors. I mean, the person who was advising him for one time was the head of ISNA, which is the, heavily funded by Wahhabi dollars. And so this injection of Saudi Arabian Salafi ideology into American politics and into American mosques and into the Canadian and American infrastructure is something which is very troubling.
But Raheel, why is it people like, Rashid Khalidi that get, that they say he used to get Obama's ear, and CARE and all these organizations? Why are people like you hired to give advice to Obama and to represent what Islam should be rather than these fundamentalists?
I think I should ask that question to the North American public.
But in general, the left is against you, am I correct?
Yes.
But
Yes,
you would
doctor.
think that if the left was on the side of women and progressive
Yes,
values,
absolutely.
you would think that leftist feminists would be supporting you.
Oh,
and
the
women.
feminists are the ones who take up most of the support in favor of the women who cover their face with face masks.
How do you explain this? This is crazy. You would think
I think
that,
it makes them probably feel superior that, these poor downtrodden Muslim women, look at them, that we have to help them. No, they are the ones who should stand up and say, why are you covering yourself like a sack?
how does it make sense that a feminist in the West who should be supporting women end up not saying a word on behalf of honor killing victims and women that
Absolutely.
are forced to veil? is it because they really just want to destroy their own society? They don't really care about women. Am I correct?
I don't think that could be part of it, and they probably don't really understand the struggles that we have to face. They don't understand, you know, sometimes.
But it's politically incorrect to side on the
politically
side.
incorrect. That is, it's political correctness that is killing the honesty of dialogue and discussion. How often can you sit down and have an honest dialogue and discussion about Islam and Muslims without everybody getting in their knickers in a knot and then going to the Human Rights Commission?
You know, when Nancy Pelosi or Hillary Clinton, when they traveled to Islamic lands, they covered. If you were hired to work for an American administration and you were sent there, would you cover?
Well, it depends on where you are. If you go into a mosque as a sign of respect, yes, you cover your hair. But you don't have to do it everywhere that you go. I mean, very often, diplomats, when they travel to a country, they take on the traditions of that country. And don't get me wrong, Jamie, there's nothing wrong in a head covering, in the sense that a head covering doesn't make anyone brain damaged. I will say this, I mean, don't forget that Jews and Jewish and Christian women years ago used to cover their head. They still do as a sign of respect. It's not that. It is the ideology that goes behind it. If you are dressing in a way that is representing an Al-Qaeda ideology, which is the face covering, and you know, which is very much worn by the women of the Taliban and the women in Al-Qaeda, then there's a huge problem with it. It is the ideology behind these actions that actually are troubling, and we have to scratch the surface.
Okay, Raheel, I think that we are losing the culture war. I think that we're losing on a lot of levels with this stealth jihad that's happening here in the West. I mean, we have Molly Norris that had a Draw Muhammad contest on the internet and Facebook. She's on the run now. The FBI told her, I mean, to go into hiding.
Right.
I mean, this is happening in the United States, it's happening in Canada, etc., on different levels.
Well, we have to speak out.
Raheel, so this is what I want to ask you. How can we turn this around? What do we have to do? Because we are losing on many battlefields.
Well,
what advice do you have for us?
We should not give in and be afraid. You know, what happens is that you are helping Al-Qaeda win the war when you are afraid. The fact that, you know, you stay under a constant red alert or an orange alert, and people like this have to go into hiding, you have to stand up for your rights. But that doesn't mean bashing Islam, because that doesn't help. And I will tell you that straight away. You lose the battle when you bash Islam, because that gives them, the extremists, an excuse to say, you know.
But if there's ingredients of Islam that are causing a problem, we have to be honest about it.
Of course,
right?
but there is a difference between dialogue, debate, discussion, criticism, and just those people who want to clamber on the bandwagon and bash Islam for no reason just because they hate it. Because they're either very ignorant and they need to read and understand that the spiritual message of Islam is not a message of terror, violence, and there are people like me who are very committed to the faith, and we're observant Muslims.
But Raheel, chapter 9, verse 5, for instance, it's infamous.
Oh, you're good. You remember your chapter and verse.
The verse of the sword. You know, kill the unbelievers, slay wherever you find them.
It's there in the Bible as well, but that doesn't mean everybody goes out and does it.
Wait, just a second. There, in Islamic supremacism is taught in Islam. I mean, that means kill the unbeliever. There's nothing really in the New Testament or the Old Testament that has that same theological precept of conquering the whole world of the unbelievers, right?
Jamie, this idea of kill the unbeliever is not a Quranic concept.
But
when you have to read it in time and place.
So you're saying that chapter 9, verse 5, as an example,
is
out of context.
It's out of context, and our Islamic scholars, you are right, need to look at this and say that was for time and place.
It needs to be denounced.
It needs to be denounced, and that's okay.
Now, is this part of the problem today in terms of today, you know, Irshad Manji said that maybe instead of saying the problem with Islam in her book or my problem with Islam, she should have said my problem with Islam today, right, in terms of her book. So what I'm saying is one of the problems with Islam today is some of the things I've just raised, like let's say certain verses or this or that there needs to be
a reform.
But there needs to be Muslim muftis and imams, clerks that come forward and said this is wrong.
That this is, and yes, absolutely. For example,
and Islamic supremacism is wrong.
Yes, Islamic supremacism is wrong because it is definitely not part of the spiritual message. The armed jihad is no longer valid. The fact that there are many issues that need to be discussed and debated within the Muslim world by Islamic scholars. And I will tell you that to a great extent it has started. There is debate and discussion. There is a look at Islam from a perspective of this century and to see what is applicable today and what needs to be left back in the 7th century. It's happening in small groups. It's happening under the radar because the extremists, of course, would attack any kind of work and look upon it as a sin. Because in their sense, the only Islam that is valid and the only Muslim who is a good Muslim is a 7th century Muslim. And this is why they're called Salafis, which means going back to the source.
Raheel, before we go, let me ask personally, I sense a lot of fire in you. I still sense a lot of strength and energy. What keeps you going? On a personal level, do you ever think, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this anymore, I'm getting tired? How do you feel personally? Where do you find the energy? Where do you find the courage on a personal level?
If I told you, you'd laugh. I guess it is my inner spiritual strength. It is how I reinforce myself. You know, as I said, I'm a woman of faith. I have a deep commitment to Islam. I am a Muslim by choice. If today you said, you know, look at what's happening around you, I would still choose to be a Muslim woman because as a Muslim woman, I have a lot of rights which I can actually enforce and I can implement.
But you don't want to live in an Islamic state.
No.
So
I chose to come and live in Canada.
And so the West has done something right by keeping the state separate from religion.
I have no problem with separation of mosque and state. In fact, I support that. But I support democracy. I support freedom. At the same time,
and that's something that needs to be reformed in Islam, right?
People, yes, they need to reform it, but there is absolutely no dichotomy between my being a Muslim and believing in all these things. And I keep my spirits up by knowing that change will come. I'm very, very optimistic, perhaps not in my lifetime,
right,
but that reform, that questioning has started.
Raheel, let us suppose that all the Muslims in the world had to put on a headset, and all the clerics and imams and muftis said to them, the woman that is about to speak is making a new rule and you have to listen. And you had 1 minute to say what Islam is going to be for now on. What would you say to your listeners? If you could speak to the Muslim world collectively and they had to listen to you.
I have to think about this, I think. I've never been put in a spot like this before. But I would say be good to human beings around you and lead a moral and ethical life.
In other words, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And you would argue that that is an Islamic teaching, but that teaching has been lost in the Islam we see
in the
today.
politicization of Islam.
Raheel, I'd like to say that I grew up with Russian dissidents. My mom and dad were warriors for freedom in the Soviet Union. I could never be as brave and noble as them, but I know the spirit of a great freedom fighter who's willing to lose almost everything for the truth. And I sense that fire sitting today with you. It was a real honor to sit with you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining Front Page Close-Up. We'll see you again soon.